Welcome to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Crew Sports Network, brought to you by ReplenishingCareTechnologies.Inc.com, Power Plus Mouth Guards. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, and I want to welcome, as always, my co-host, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I'm doing very, very well. Always happy to be on. Let's talk some boxing, Mike.
And, of course, as always, we have our lawyer from West Virginia, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Good to be here, Mike. Good to be here. And I'm splitting time. I was in New Jersey Monday, but I am back in West Virginia tonight, and I'm ready to go.
All right, and we have a special guest tonight. If you listened about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I interviewed John Raspanti from the Intimate Warfare book that he wrote with Dennis Taylor. Great book, by the way. Outstanding. I read it in like 3 hours, didn't put it down. And he's also, I think you're the lead writer for Max Boxing also, John?
That is correct, maxboxing.com. How you guys doing?
All right, so how you doing tonight, John?
Great to be with you guys. I wandered away from a concert here to be with you guys, so, feel privileged. So.
Well, if you want. I mean, Jeremiah can sing.
Boxing always takes precedence.
That's true.
Jeremiah can sing. He can sing to you if you want.
Oh, really? Yeah, well.
Jeremiah, sing a song.
No,
I'm going to knock you out.
No, I'm like Will
Jeremiah
Ferrell
was always a big LL Cool J.
No, he could do Gonna Fly now, right?
I thought he was going to do Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog myself, so,
There you go. That's why every time Jeremiah calls me, I think of the song Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog.
Bullfrog, yeah. Three Dog Night.
Yeah. But, hey, let's go ahead and we'll get into this week's action coming up. We've got an IBF World Lightweight Championship. Shouldn't be, because Robert Easter and Denis Shafikov are fighting for the IBF World Lightweight Championship, and I know that John Einreinhofer and Jeremiah both love the Herschel champions. But let's get into it. Robert Easter is defending the title that he won against Richard Comey, defended it against Luis Cruz back in February, takes on Shafikov, who actually lost a split decision to Comey. And also, I think, did he win that? He won that fight.
He beat Comey.
Yeah, he beat Comey on a split decision, and then he also beat former U.S. Olympian James Herring. His last loss was against Ranzis Barthelemy, and there we go. I think I got almost everybody's name almost right, Jeremiah, but what's your take on this fight?
I think it's a good fight. Easter, to me, has looked pretty damn good so far. I've always been pretty partial to the tall guys because I'm a tall, wiry guy myself. And Easter looks like one of the best, in the game right now. For me, it's an interesting styles matchup because Shafikov he's got a lot of head movement. He's able to weave his way inside, and he's been able to beat taller guys in the past. Unfortunately, I don't think he'll be able to do that against Robert Easter. I think if the Rancis Bartholomew fight is if that's any indicator of how this will go, I think Easter, decisions him. I think he's just a bit too good for Shafikov at this point. Shafikov, as much as I like him, I just don't think he's ever going to get over the hump.
Yeah, but my question, John Einreinhofer, is this. When you look at the guys they've fought, I think Shafikov has fought the better competition. I don't think Easter, other than the Comey fight, has really been tested. Do you give Shafikov a chance in this fight?
Oh, I definitely give him a chance. I think that Easter is probably going to edge this one out. Easter is a slightly bigger favorite than I thought. I saw Shafikov is close to a plus 400 underdog when we got on here, and I checked right before we got on here. But I think it's going to be a little bit of a closer fight than that. I do think Easter will pull it out, but I liked Robert Easter a lot before the Mendez fight and in his performance against Mendez, which I thought was a spectacular performance. He kind of looked like a Paul Williams with maybe a little bit more punching power, but then I did not like the way he looked against Comey, and I think with Cruz, who was such an inferior opponent, he had a few losses in a row before one upset win he had, going into the Easter fight. I didn't think Easter looked that great there. Shafikov looked really, really sharp against Herring, and he beat Comey himself. I don't think he looked bad against Bartholomew either, even though he lost. Bartholomew pulled away a little bit down the stretch. I think these guys are both legitimate top 10 fighters. Forget the alphabet belt. but you don't see that much in today's boxing. Guys are legitimately in the top 10 taking on each other. So I think this fight's been a little underplayed. I think just because of the lack of cable distribution for it, I think it's a shame it's on Bounce. I think it's a better fight than that. But Bounce's ratings for these fights have actually been good, so hopefully enough people will see this fight.
All right, I'm going to disagree with you guys. I think Shafikov pulls the upset. My reason is this. Number one, he's trained by Abel Sanchez, who I think is one of the best trainers in the fight game. Also, he's a southpaw. And I haven't seen Easter really fight the competition yet, and I think Shafikov takes the first half of this fight, does enough in the second half of this fight to win a decision. But I've been wrong before. I think it was once exactly in the last 2 years, so I could be wrong here.
Mike, you're going to get one of these upset picks right one of these days.
I've only picked one upset, so I usually just let you guys pick the fight. But you guys are boring because you guys always agree with each other, so I got to add a little spice to it. But I think Shafikov wins the fight in a close fight. I think he handled Comey easier than what Easter did. I mean, Easter had a hell of a time with Comey. That was a great fight. I think it last August or September. But that brings us to one of Jeremiah's favorites, Alexander Povetkin against Andrei Rudenko. What's your take on this? I mean, Povetkin has definitely fought the better competition. I'll go ahead and I'll give you my pick quick. Rudenko to me, I mean, you got a technical decision over Mike Malo. You got a loss by unanimous decision to Lucas Brown and Huey Fury. I think he's too small for Povetkin. I think Povetkin knocks him out somewhere around the 5th round. Jeremiah?
Yeah, no, I agree with that assessment. I think Rudenko is just he's just a guy to get Povetkin back in the contention. I mean, Rudenko's not a bad fighter. I mean, he's a fringe kind of guy. Yeah, no, not even that. I'd say maybe he's top 40, top 50. But Povetkin, for me, is one of the best skilled heavyweights in the game. I know he's been, he's done some bad. He deserves to be punished for that with all the tests and whatnot. But he's just too good for this guy. I mean, Povetkin is really, I think in terms of talent, I think he's a top 3 guy. And this just kind of gets him back in the title contention. I expect him to knock Rudenko out as well. I think a mid-round stoppage is pretty accurate.
John Raspanti, you got any opinion on this one?
Well, yeah, I'm shocked in a way that he's even fighting after all the steroid controversy with him. But, I guess we kind of ignore that. But he's a good fighter, except when he fought Klitschko. Klitschko cleaned his clock. But he's good, and he should win. I don't see any reason to think he won't. He's in today's age of the heavyweight, he's up there in the top 5, I would say. So I think he'll win. He's a bigger guy. He's a little fresher, I think. And so, I think he won't have a problem winning this fight.
All right, John Einreinhofer?
Well, I'm with John, where I don't know why he's fighting except for the fact that the Russians are going to let him fight. He's not, he's been dropped from the transnational rankings. He's been dropped from the ring rankings, and rightfully so. He got caught with PEDs twice, and then he lost a civil trial to Wilder. He took Duhaupas' head off when Duhaupas had to come in on short notice, and Povetkin was all PED'd up. I'm not crazy for this, about this. I mean, we're going to let guys come back, obviously. Povetkin's not the first guy to get caught with PEDs, but, he's got to sit out for a while or something like that. Obviously, there's no uniform worldwide commission or credible sanctioning body that's going to make him do that. And he's an attraction in Russia, so he's going to fight. He probably wins, but I don't consider him a credible person to be in a legit title picture at this point, unless he takes some sort of punishment, or he's got to be out of the rankings for a while, be out of contention. So I'm not crazy about this. I figure he wins it probably by KO, but it's not really on my radar screen as something that should be going on.
Well, so Jeremiah, I know you're a big Povetkin fan. What's your take on what John just said about him being suspended?
Well, no, I mean, I can't blame him. I mean, if you're going to do stuff like that, especially if you're going to get popped twice. The thing about the first test, I mean, Povetkin sounds like a repeat offender, but he was cleared of any wrongdoing in the first go-round because his meldonium levels were well within the allowed. So I believe it was USADA or WADA. No, WADA, okay. So meldonium just recently became illegal, and so WADA said that if you had so much in your system, it would be a passing grade until. So once they did data testing and found that Povetkin had meldonium in his system, when you look at the amount that he actually had, he was well within the limit. So the first one I don't hold so much against him because he's cleared of any wrongdoing. The second time, yes, there's something fishy there. He needs to, he needs to be suspended. He needs to serve his time. But this is like so many other things in boxing. I mean, it's corruption, right? I mean, Povetkin has a Russian billionaire backing him. He probably paid some of the organizations off, like the WBO and WBA, which Povetkin is now ranked in. He probably just paid him off. He's getting the fight. I mean, that's I'm not going to put my fans' bias over justice. I mean, Povetkin should be punished for this, but again, it's like you see so many other things in boxing.
All right, that brings us to the main event: Manny Pacquiao against Jeff the Hornet Horn. It's hard to say that with a straight face. Horn, 2012 Olympian. I call him a poor man's Ricky Hatton. I mean, he does have some skill. He's a tough kid. He had a TK, or he knocked out Funiki, or whatever the hell his name is, but he knocked out Funiki. I thought he really looked good in that fight, John Raspanti. But he still got dropped by a body blow, but he got up, recovered. It was at the end of, I think, the third round when he got dropped by it. But I just think that this is too much too soon for Horn, and I don't even know if he waited a couple years if it would not be too soon, if you know what I'm saying. What do you think, John?
Yeah, it's like we were talking a few days ago, Mike. It's somewhat of a cash out, I think. But we got a writer on Max Boxing, Anthony Cox, who believes that Horn has a chance because Jeff Fenech says that he has a chance. He has a chance every time in boxing. We've seen too many upsets. Those old folks that remember, take Tyson Douglas for example. We know things can happen in boxing. One punch can change the outcome. All that stuff, cliche. But I just don't see it. He beat Randall Bailey, and Randall was like 40-something years old when he beat him 42 maybe, and it's a good fight for Pacquiao in the sense that it's a good money fight. Should be a relatively easy fight. The thing is, when a guy gets to be 38 years old, sometimes you don't know for sure. Will he get another cliche in a sense? Will he get old overnight? Will he not really be motivated? So there's all those to me, those are always the intangibles to go into a fight like this. Freddie Roach always says the same thing. He's knocking everybody out in sparring. He's due for a knockout. I mean, Freddie's been begging for a knockout for about 9 years now. I think he's going to get it this Saturday. I think he's going to knock out Jeff Horn, but I think Horn's going to try his hardest. He's been training for months, and he knows this is his shot. And really, in a sense, there's not a lot of pressure on the kid because it's all on Pacquiao, because they're all talking about Pacquiao's got to look good to get into the big sweepstakes, and they're still talking about Mayweather. Oh God! But Horn.
I'd rather see that than Mayweather-McGregor, though. I will give you that.
Yeah. I think Horn just go in there, do his best. Maybe he'll get lucky. Try to hit him with that right hand like Marquez did. But good luck on that. But Pacquiao, even at 38, I mean, if he's a poor man's Ricky Hatton, we all remember what happened to Ricky Hatton. Even though this is a different Pacquiao now, but I don't think I think Pacquiao wins it unless, like I said, he's focused on his senatorial duties. He's not there and he gets caught. I mean, that could happen, but I think the chances of that are pretty much slim and none.
Yeah, and John Einreinhofer, my thing was this. When I watched a bunch of Horn fights a year ago. We had him, actually, me and Jeremiah interviewed him for The Grueling Truth, which you can find at thegruelingtruth.net. But we interviewed him. He's a great kid. He comes to fight. So I think he's going to pressure Pacquiao. I think he's going to have some success early on. But I think the problem is when you watch him attack somebody, he has a tendency, even though he's a well-schooled boxer, I think he's actually a fairly well-schooled boxer. But the problem I see is when he starts to throw the punches, he's really good at keeping range. But from time to time, he'll square up. And I think that he's going to square up one of those times, especially 5th, 6th, 7th round when he's a little tired. And I think he's going to get caught. He's going to get hit harder than he's ever been hit before. And I think that's the problem. Like I said, I think he's great at keeping range, but he has a tendency to square up at times, which can be deadly against a guy like Pacquiao.
Yeah, I just think, for me, it just comes down to, Pacquiao's 38-year-old welterweight. Of course, he started in the much lighter divisions, but I think what we got to remember is 38 is still very old for a welterweight. It's extremely old for the divisions where Pacquiao came up from, and it's still very, very old for a welterweight. So he could lose it at any time. He hasn't been knocking anybody out. He has been scoring knockdowns, though, but he hasn't taken anybody out. Yeah, based on the fact that Pacquiao has just fought so much better competition, and at least up to this fight, Horn's not a legit top 10 contender, but, Tim Bradley and Jesse Vargas were, and Pacquiao is still pretty much dominating those guys. So until you see him just come into the ring and not have it, you're going to have to assume he's just got too much for Jeff Horn. One thing Pacquiao has been pretty impressive with in his older age is that he still throws quite a few punches. Usually the punch output would be down, but his is not bad. And I think as long as he continues to do that, he's probably going to keep winning for a while, and he should have too much for Horn. I don't know if Pacquiao is going to knock anybody out anymore at this point. So I wouldn't necessarily be looking for a KO, but unless he loses it all at once, he should have for Horn.
But I think this, John. I think you get a stoppage from cuts, something like that. I think that's where the knockout comes. Because I think Horn's going to stand there and take it as long as he can, but I think eventually they're going to stop it. I don't think he's got the skill level to hang with Pacquiao, but I do think Horn's a good fighter, but there's a difference between being a good fighter and being Manny Pacquiao. Jeremiah, what do you think?
All right. Well, I mean, I'm probably the most familiar with Jeff Horn here. I mean, I wrote an article back on him in 2015. His dad was nice enough to contact me, and they were all real nice guys. And so I've seen a lot of tape on Jeff Horn, and I think the comparisons to Ricky Hatton are pretty apt. To me, he is a poor man's Ricky Hatton. So how does that bode? I don't think it bodes very well. I mean, he closes distance quick like Ricky Hatton, but he's vulnerable like Ricky Hatton in that in-between area. So in the time that he is at distance and tries to close it, there's that opening there where he kind of gets a little lackadaisical in his defense. I think that, and not only that, Jeff Horn, he's a tough kid, but I don't think his chin is that good. If you watch a number of fights, I mean, he was dropped by Funica. It was a body shot.
Funica hit him with a body shot and dropped him.
Right, but he
didn't hit him on the jaw. And I mean, anybody gets caught in the right spot in the body is going down. I know if I get hit in the body, I don't know about you, Jeremiah, but I'm going down probably. I got a soft belly. You can hit me in the head all day, and I can stand there and take it, but you hit me in the belly, and I'm done.
Yeah, you're a bit like Homer Simpson in that regard, aren't you? But yeah,
well, I'm like 48 years old, so my belly's soft. So.
Yeah, mine's not as toned as it used to be either. But he was also Jeff Horn was also dropped by Randall Bailey. If you watch that fight, he got pretty good. Exactly. I mean, Bailey's always been a pure puncher, but he's also old. And Horn has, from what I've heard, again, this is just rumors. I've heard that Horn has been hurt in sparring a number of times as well. Horn is a good fighter. A lot of people forget that he was an Olympian. He didn't make it that far, but he is a good fighter. He's got some class. But I think you're also right, Mike, in pointing out the fact that he gets a little square sometimes. And his infighting, it really needs some nuance. I mean, this is a guy who can close distance well, but when he gets you on the ropes, he doesn't really bang you like Ricky Hatton used to. Ricky Hatton had
he just throws one or two punches and then gets his distance again.
Right, and against Pacquiao, that's not going to do the trick. And not only that, his hand speed is not that quick. Pacquiao is still significantly quicker than Horn is. And if you're going to impose, I'd like to see a guy like Horn impose his size on somebody like Pacquiao. But again, he's got a closed distance. I mean, if he can do that, again, maybe he can get overnight and would have one of the biggest upsets, in recent years. But I've actually got Manny Pacquiao stopping Horn. He's a nice guy. I really appreciate him for coming on the show and his father for contacting me and whatnot. But I just can't see him winning here. But again, it's boxing. Can never be sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I think we all agree that Pacquiao's probably going to win this fight.
I mean, is it really?
The thing is this, though. I think this is going to be a good fight for however long it lasts because I don't think Jeff Horn's going to back down at all. So, and I think Jeff Horn was picked not just because he's a safe opponent, but he is an opponent with his style, John Raspanti, that Manny Pacquiao can look good and knock out.
Exactly. That's right. That's why I said I think he's going to stop him. I mean, they know exactly what they're doing here. They want a dramatic stoppage. They want to say, see, Manny is still Manny. Manny is back. Manny scored his first knockout in 9 years. It's a great PR move. It's a little bit of a gamble, but boxing is about gambling. So you have to do it. And like I said,
and you're doing it in Australia. It's going to be a spectacle. You're going to have 60,000 people there. It's going to be kind of like a mini Joshua Klitschko. And, I mean, it's going to be on ESPN. I mean, Bob Arum right here, I think hit this out of the park, John Einreinhofer. He put it on network television, basically, ESPN. Anybody can watch it. You know, and a lot of people may not have seen Pacquiao's last few fights since the debacle with Floyd Mayweather. So he's putting him in against the guy he's going to look good against, and he's going to put him in a situation where the most eyes possible can see him. I mean, Bob Arum, even though we all know he's a crook, you got to give him props here. He's doing the right thing with this, John.
He is doing the right thing, but he finally got off the suicide mission. He was forced to do the right thing because he got pressure put on him by Heyman and PBC, and then HBO stopped giving him big money for his Drek, and his pay-per-view numbers were terrible. He did that top-rank pay-per-view fiasco on his own with Pacquiao. Then he tried it again with that triple header recently. That I don't think anybody's seen those pay-per-view numbers have seen the light of day from that top-rank excursion with the Gilberto Ramirez and Valdez. That card. So I think he was forced to do it. But with that said, I wanted to get that out of the way first. At this point, yes, smart people adjust. He's finally made the right adjustment. The only reason, even as a hardcore, boxing observer, that this is what I really care about this is because he's put it on ESPN. I mean, otherwise, fighting Jeff Horn in Australia on a pay-per-view that nobody was going to buy. Wasn't going to pique anyone's interest. But now, you make it an ESPN fight, and if it turns out to be a good fight, or even if it's against Jeff Horn, if Pacquiao does score some kind of spectacular KO, I don't think he will, but if he does, or if the fight turns out to be surprisingly good, or if Horn pulls a shocker or something like that, yeah, you've got a lot of people seeing it. But the danger with fights like Pacquiao-Horn when you put them on ESPN is that they're just bad fights. And Horn gets clipped with a weak shot and goes down early or something like that and gets counted out, or somebody gets cut or butted or something like that, or it's a terrible fight. Let's just hope for boxing's sake for the best. This has suddenly become a good opportunity. I do think it's a good thing that Arum's done here. I think he woke up, and hey, that's gonna be a good thing. At least we're progressing into the future, and we all know it's going to help boxing if somehow there's something entertaining comes out of this Saturday night.
Well, it has to be better than Mayweather and McGregor, which is nothing but bad for boxing, John. But we've had that discussion before.
It's going to sell, Mike. It's going to sell.
What was that?
Did you ask me if Mayweather-McGregor is a good fight?
No, it's just me and John always have this discussion because he thinks it's good for boxing, and I think it's stupid. What do you think, John? Or what do you think, John Raspanti?
I don't think it's good. It's not necessarily bad because I remember the farces of the 70s, Ali and Inoki, and Ali was going to fight Wilt Chamberlain. I remember that really well. But see, the difference, though, is that Muhammad Ali, he had a lot more love than Mayweather, so that it's negative, but it's going to
it's forgivable with Muhammad Ali.
It was, exactly. That's my point, Mike. But, it's going to sell because Mayweather hasn't even started to sell it yet. So it's not bad and it's not good. It will get some people talking. I mean, it's an exhibition as far as I'm concerned. The thing is that the fact that a fight gets licensed between a guy who's 49-0 and between a guy who's 0-0 tells you that it's a joke. So it's impossible to defend as far as I'm concerned as far as that. But as a spectacle, as a farce, as like a ridiculous, surreal thing, then okay, knock yourself out. You want to see it? You want to be convinced McGregor's going to get lucky? Go ahead. But, more power to him. This is America. Let him make the money. But, I'm not going to write about it. I'm not going to have anything on Max Boxing about it. We're not going to. Well, we'll talk about it on the Ringside Boxing Show a little, but I'm not going to go there much with it. So, it's just as I said, as a person who, if somebody said to me, hey, you know, you can make $100 million doing this, I'd do it. So that's what I mean. I can't.
I'm not knocking them for doing it.
Yeah. But as far as boxing does so many things to itself that's so bad that I don't know how many more things it can do. You know, between the bad judging and the bad refereeing and some fights, like you said, Mayweather and Pacquiao, that was such a debacle. Boxing always shoots itself in the foot and then comes back. You know, it's like Godzilla or something. It won't die. You know, there's always a sequel. Thank God for that.
Yeah, because everybody wants to see two men get in the ring and see who's tougher.
It's right. It's been going on forever, and it always will. It will never die. That's why every
right now, if me and you went in the middle of a deserted street and we started fighting, there would be 500 people surrounding us within 3 minutes.
Oh, you better believe it. It's always going to be here, and it's a joke when it's dying. It's not what it once was, but it's always going to be here. And,
but you still had 90,000 people show up for Klitschko and Joshua.
Exactly. Well, that's England, too. The UK, they are incredible fans in the UK. Amazing.
Well, see, I think a lot of people forget. You know, it's like baseball. And I had this debate with Chris Fury, one of our baseball writers, but he's talking about how boxing's ratings are terrible compared to baseball's. And they're not, because this is the thing. If Thurman Garcia did 5 million views and the National League Championship Series did 9 million, how many people worldwide watch the National League Championship as opposed to Thurman and Garcia?
Yeah. No, that's very true. And that's very true. And Thurman Garcia was a home run, if you want to use baseball as an analogy. It was. It might have not been the greatest fight that everybody was hoping it would be, but it was still, to me, it was always a very tactical, very competitive, two elite fighters.
Yeah, it wasn't a terrible fight.
Really good. Huh? Pardon me?
It wasn't a terrible fight. It was a solid fight between two really skilled guys, which when you get two really skilled guys, a lot of times that's what you get.
Yeah, and Garcia's a counterpuncher, so it wasn't that much of a surprise. He's not the guy that goes crazy on somebody. Thurman's very talented. But,
all right.
Yeah, I mean, boxing's always going to be here, Mike. It's always going to be around.
All right. Well, that's good for our network because we got a lot of boxing stuff now, which also I was remiss in introducing you also as the host of our now Ringside boxing show also. You want to tell people a little bit about that and when they can hear it?
Well, Dennis Taylor is the host. I'm just one of the so-called experts with Rizwan and Travis Hartman, who's a professional boxer. Dennis hosts it every week. We do our thing, every week. We've been doing it Dennis has been doing it about 8 years. I joined him about 4 years ago. Rizwan and Travis have been with him, I think, from the beginning. So, yeah, we try to have some really good guests. You know, we got Jerry Fitch coming up on Sunday, which might not excite the younger guys, but Jerry's a very good writer. He was around the Cleveland scene. He remembers the Wepner Ali fight really well. He worked with Don King. He's got some incredible stories about Don King and the mob, and you know they're kind of interconnected. So he's just really a really good guest, really funny guy, very interesting guy. And, you know, we're trying to get Keith Thurman on in August. So, you know, the show is a lot of fun, and we have a blast doing it like you guys tonight. I mean, it's the same thing. We talk in the first 25 minutes about what's going on, and then we have our guests come on. So, yeah, and the fact that it's doing so well on The Grueling Truth, trust me, Mike, has us just totally thrilled. So I really thank you.
We are too, because the numbers help us also. And the quality is great. And if you go on thegruelingtruth.net, you can actually see one of Angelo Dundee's final interviews, which was a great show, John.
Yeah. Well, that's Dennis. You know, he got him on there, and it was right before Angelo died, and Angelo was always a great guest, and we've had so many good guests on, you know, and that's the thing, and it's I always give Dennis the credit because he's such a good interviewer, and we just follow him, so it's his baby, and he's doing a great job. But like I said, we're just happy people are listening. We couldn't get anybody barely to listen for the last 7.5 years, and it's like, hey, we think we're pretty good, but why isn't anybody listening? But they're listening now, so we're really happy, Mike.
Yeah, and also you talked about Chuck Wepner. There was an interview that was put up, I think, last week with Chuck Wepner and Liv Schreiber from the movie Chuck, about Chuck Wepner's life, the real Rocky. That's a great listen, too, so I would definitely check that out, guys. Let's go ahead and move on to some boxing.
That was something I got, Mike. Sorry, I jumped in there. That was lucky. I happen to know a publicist who was working on the movie Chuck. And, hey, if you guys haven't seen Chuck, it's really a good movie. And he got leave for us, so that was quite quite a thing to have Lee Strubler on there talking.
They didn't show it at the movie theaters here in Lawrenceburg, Indiana.
It didn't show in many theaters, but that's not because it wasn't a good movie. It was.
They need to get it on Amazon or Netflix for me. That's how I do it. I haven't been to see a movie at the movie theater, I think, since 2006 when Rocky Balboa came out. And if there's another Rocky movie, I'll go watch that right the day it comes out, too, because that's the way I've always done it since Rocky II on. So
should have went and seen Creed. It was real good.
Creed's an awesome movie. I will go see Creed 2. It's supposed to be in theaters, I think, Thanksgiving weekend or something. But, Creed was a great movie also.
Yeah, it was.
Let's go ahead and transition, talk a little boxing news before we get out of here. My news of the week, I wanted everybody's opinion on this. We'll start off with Jeremiah. Is Andre Ward possibly against Tony Bellew?
Yeah, I've heard that. I mean, and I've seen, Bellew likes to run his mouth, so he basically wants to fight anybody and everybody who's notable. He seems to think that he can beat Andre Ward. I don't know very many people who would agree with him, but, I mean, if that happens at cruiserweight, which I think is the assumed weight class.
I heard they were going to do it at heavyweight.
Well, go ahead. Honestly, I think Andre Ward whips him. I don't really think there's Bellew is a good fighter, but again, when he watches fights against the very best, when he watched him against Stevenson, in my opinion, he was well on his way to losing the Hay fight had he not hurt his leg. I think Ward could move up to heavyweight and beat a guy like Bellew pretty clearly.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Roy Jones thing. You go up, you cherry pick the one guy you think you can beat, and then maybe go back down in weight. At least I hope he does, because John Einreinhofer, the light heavyweight division is loaded, so I don't know why he would leave it. Roy Jones was in a division that was not nearly as loaded. I could see why maybe he'd jump up and try to make a little bit of money, but I wish Ward would just stay at light heavyweight and fight these guys that are hungry, that are ranked in the top 10, because the light heavyweight division, to me, is the best it's been since the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a lot of fights there. If the promotional and TV stuff could be worked out, that's the question. But you've got the possible winner of Joe Smith and Sullivan Barrera, obviously aligned with HBO there. But we'll have to see what Ward's going to do with his promotional and TV stuff, with Rock Nation's probably on its last legs in boxing. But I can go either way on this. I love a lot of the potential fights Ward would have at light heavy, and I agree it's a return to the glory days of the late 70s, early 80s for the light heavyweight division, and there's a lot of fights I'd like to see, and Ward could be in a lot of good ones. But I'm also intrigued about Ward fighting at heavyweight. Bellew would be, I think Ward would have no problem with him if he fought him at heavyweight. He could use that to sort of break in the division if he wants to do it that way. Or he could, try to reach for something bigger, no pun intended. And I did check this out before we went on. In Britain, they list odds on a lot of potential fights that haven't even been signed, so I like to check that out. And of course, this is Anthony Joshua's home country, and they had a line on Andre Ward and Anthony Joshua, and Ward was a plus 600 underdog. So plus 600 underdog in England, in Great Britain, not too bad. So, looks like if he does want to do the heavyweight thing and do a little bit like Tony and Jones were doing, or Michael Spinks, it's going to be taken seriously, I think. So, why not go for it all? But we'll see. I think either of those options are good. Just fighting at cruiserweight doesn't do anything for me if he's serious about that option. He talked about it a little bit. So
let me jump in real quick. I was gonna say, I know, John, you and I really don't give two squirts of piss about the alphabet trinkets, but we understand that the fighters do, and a lot of times it's unfortunate because sometimes it gives them safe haven. These organizations are just corrupt, arbitrary rankings, on and on and on. But what if he went up and fought a guy like Joseph Parker? You think he could whip him pretty easily?
I think he could beat Parker. Parker just seems to be kind of, that would be kind of following the Roy Jones, James Toney model. And that's a good point, Jeremiah, because if they could work it out promotion-wise, Parker might need to take that fight too, because he's going to start losing respect because his performances haven't been that good, and that would almost put him in that John Ruiz type of position, who was a victim of Jones and Toney. So Yeah, I mean, I would think that Andre Ward would have a shot at beating Joseph Parker, and he probably would have a shot at beating him right now. All he's got to do is, figure out a way to not get hit with Parker's jab, I think, and he'd probably be able to do enough to win a decision there. So that's really, even though Parker's a big guy, that's not a terrible matchup for him right now.
All right, John Raspanti, what's your opinion on Andre Ward possibly fighting in the heavyweight division?
I've been writing about Andre Ward for about 8 years. Met him about 8 years ago. Nothing the guy does surprises me. I played sports all my life, Mike, and I know you have. And you meet people that are so competitive, you can feel it just sitting near them. And that was how Andre was. But the thing you guys aren't mentioning, is I think what he's doing here is I think the Tony Bellew fight is a good possibility because I think he's pretty much getting close to retirement. I do. I thought he might even retire after Kovalev. So come up with a second fight because he doesn't feel like he has a lot to prove anymore, and he has to get motivated. Fighting Tony Bellew would definitely motivate him, and he'd make a lot of money doing it. I agree with the other guys. I think he definitely beats Tony Bellew. I think it would be pretty competitive for a few rounds, and then Andre would figure him out and then just start beating him up for the next 8 or 9 rounds and win the decision. He's the kind of guy, Andre Ward, is you go ahead and bet against him because he always finds a way to win. I mean, he's never going to be considered a pretty fighter, obviously, like Sugar Ray Robinson or the greatest, but Muhammad. But he is the greatest guy that I think I've ever seen. Just watching him spar and work in the gym is incredible just because he's so competitive. If anybody even says anything that he takes as a slight, then he just beats the crud out of him. So he's an amazing athlete. So pretty much anything he does doesn't surprise me. Now, I hope he doesn't fight Joshua because I think that would be ridiculous if he did. But that was a really good point by Jeremiah about Joseph Parker. I agree that he probably could beat Joseph Parker. I thought a few years ago that Parker was really looking very good, but it seems like he's stopped improving or something. He has not looked very good in his last few fights, and I think he's going to fight Hughie Fury next. But I think that Andre could beat him. Yes, I think you guys are right. Just get inside, and he's faster. He's a better athlete. His hands are faster. He probably could beat him. So there's a couple of big ones right there, and he could make a few million and then just ride off in the sunset. So
do you think he'll take a shot at a Joshua or a Wilder?
I doubt it. I think they're too big. Andre is 6'1", same height as me, and you're talking 6'7", 6'6". He might. He's not scared of anybody, so it would never be something like that. He might take a shot. I mean, I know Virgil Hunter wants him to take a shot at Joshua. At least he mentioned it. I don't know.
I'd rather see him take a shot at Wilder because I think the way Wilder fights, I think Ward might be able to get him.
He might. That's a good point because he just has to get inside. He just don't get hit with that right hand, but he gets inside. He's such a gritty guy on the inside. His inside work is so incredible. Start pounding him in the body. He definitely have a chance. Yeah. So there's a lot of intriguing possibilities for Andre Ward, and I only think he's probably got a year or two left though, and that's why he's not talking. Doesn't really care about the light heavyweights right now. He's moving on up.
All right, that brings us to another heavyweight possibility. Joshua Klitschko 2. They're talking about possibly in Vegas. John Raspanti, have you heard anything about that?
I have, and I think really what that's all about is to bring Joshua to America. Mr. Joshua comes to America and bring him here, and I think Eddie Hearn is pretty confident that Joshua could do a number on Klitschko again, even though their first fight was extremely competitive, and when Joshua got knocked down, it looked like he was done. I mean, for a round and a half, he was wobbly and incoherent, and then he got his second win, and he did an incredible job of coming back to win that fight. Usually the rematches are easier the second time around. Doesn't mean it's guaranteed, but I think Eddie Hearn feels that he's obviously not going to get 90,000. Probably bring it over to T-Mobile or MGM Grand Garden Arena and get 20,000 plus. But I think behind it is the point to get of getting Anthony Joshua not introduced to the American boxing fans, because we all know him, but maybe a bigger audience, so that he can come back to America and fight when he wants to, go back to the UK, come back to America, make him bigger and bigger and bigger. So I kind of think that's what the thought process there. But
kind of like when they brought Klitschko to Madison Square Garden to fight Sultan Ibragimov.
Well, not really, but
well, what I'm saying is it backfired because it was a boring-ass fight. Yeah, but I think that was their intention.
Right, but we knew that with Klitschko. I don't think it's like that with Joshua. He's 19-0 with 19 knockouts. His fights don't go the distance. He's not boring. He's very charismatic. Klitschko's not. He do a lot of PR and everything, so it would do fine, and he probably wins the rematch. So I think that's what's behind it. But again, like I said a little while ago, it's kind of a gamble. You don't know exactly for sure what's going to happen, but you plot it out. You think, okay, this is probably going to work, and you go for it. And I think that's what Eddie Hearn is thinking here.
All right, John Einreinhofer?
Yeah, I agree with John Raspanti there. I think that Eddie Hearn is looking at Joshua, having a big KO in the United States, and that's why he's looking at the Vegas. Showtime's got a multi-fight deal with Joshua already. So Eddie Hearn's obviously got his interest, and then Showtime's already looked at Joshua as ultimately being, an American property, kind of like Lennox Lewis was. I think that they're looking at let's face it, over the long haul, Lennox Lewis ended up being good for HBO. I mean, you look back at that era with Lennox Lewis, what he did.
Yeah, but Lennox Lewis also had Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson, guys like that.
But it looks better now, and it looks better now in hindsight than it did at the time. I was fortunate enough I got to a lot of Lewis's fights over here, and there were good crowds and good atmosphere, a lot of traveling British fans, good crowds from here. The fights were sellouts, and he was consistently defending the title here. He was the real, linear champ, and that worked out well. I think that Showtime sees the same thing for Joshua, and they signed him early on. They've already had him for a few fights, and they've been showing him from the UK in the afternoon, and I'm sure that they, now like to have him, fighting in the US, fighting in prime time, or in their usual time slots, and getting some big KOs. Like John said, he's a guy that's been scoring the knockout, and he is a charismatic guy, and he showed vulnerabilities against Klitschko. I think we can't forget that Klitschko was 41 years old, coming off a dreadful loss and a long layoff, and Joshua was in a life or death struggle with him. I don't think that necessarily bodes well for Joshua down the road, but it could mean he's going to be in some good fights, because even though he KO'd Klitschko late, he looks like the type of guy that can get gassed sometimes, and that's not uncommon with heavyweights, of course. But
I'll tell you this: I think Deontay Wilder will get gassed even quicker, and I don't think he'll take a punch as well.
I don't agree with that at all. I think that Wilder will not get gassed. Wilder, when he comes in at about 219 pounds, will have a lot more stamina than Anthony Joshua. He'll be able to move around him and stick him with the jab.
Well, we're always going to disagree with this till they fight, but I think Joshua blows Wilder out, because I've never seen a great heavyweight that swings like that unless it was on old grainy film from the early 1900s.
Yeah, I think people get too caught up in a couple of highlights like that. You got to look at what.
No, I watch these fights. I don't just watch highlights. And the dude has fought nobody. Hey, all I know is this: if he's a great knockout artist, why is the only man that was halfway decent standing after 12 rounds that he fought?
Well, he got dropped. Remember that too, and he took a big beating. So, he
took a big beating. I mean, that was a boring fight, I thought.
That was Severn took a bad beating. He's never been the same since. And
Severn was never the same before. I mean, Severn beat Chris Arreola. That's his biggest claim to fame.
Beat him twice.
Still a legit top 10 fighter at the time. Now,
Chris Arreola.
And remember Joshua's faced. Klitschko was off for 17 months, and he dropped Joshua. Joshua was in a life and death struggle with him, and Klitschko looked absolutely pathetic against Tyson Fury. So. Who else is Joshua? So is Joshua Bill, Charles Martin, Dylan White.
Yeah, but the fight against Klitschko means he's fought a lot better competition than Deontay Wilder ever has.
Well, I don't know how that's going to play out necessarily when Klitschko was 41 years old, coming off a 17-month layoff.
Yeah, but the other thing I do know is this: Klitschko was a great fighter, still a very good fighter. The thing is this: Joshua was in a fight where he got caught by somebody that can really punch, and he got dropped and he got hurt, and he got up and he won the fight. We don't know if Deontay Wilder can do that or not.
Well, we know Deontay Wilder handled himself fine against Severn. Now, if I were managing would I have taken some tougher fights in the 2 years since then? I think I would have. But he was supposed to fight Povetkin, and he was like favorite, and the Povetkin.
And Povetkin, I don't think really did he test positive. I mean, come on, Wilder should have fought him. With what he tested positive for, I know Jeremiah looked this up pretty good, but it's not technically a steroid, is it, Jeremiah?
No, it's a I believe it's a stamina enhancer that the Eastern Europeans have been using for many years. I mean, tons and tons. I think Anna Kournikova, it was caught in her system. I mean, lots and lots of these guys, it was put in their system. But the thing about it was, so it's called meldonium, and the amount that Povetkin had in his system, as I talked about earlier, it was well below the allowed level. So technically, he didn't do anything wrong.
Well, he was taking a heart drug. It's used for heart patients, and then he got caught. He got caught again. He's obviously been a user. I mean, he wasn't not using, in my opinion, for Wilder, and he had traces in his system, and then he started picking up use for Stearns. It just doesn't make any sense. So, Wilder was still a favorite over him anyway when he'd been taking the PEDs.
Yeah, but Wilder wasn't going to beat Povetkin in Russia. Yeah, we're going to disagree on that too, but Povetkin's fought a lot better competition. He's a lot more skilled fighter, and he can take a punch.
Except that Wilder was the favorite over him in Russia when that fight was finished.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, though. You make somebody a favorite not because you think they're going to win, because in Vegas you think you're going to get even money, which means Vegas wins no matter what.
But you still got to account for all money, smart money, dumb money, people that know what they're doing.
90% of the money is coming from the United States, not Russia. Because they were too busy fixing our election, if you don't watch TV. They didn't have time to worry about odds on a fight.
Right. Multitasking.
Yeah, I mean, they were worried about trying to keep Hillary Clinton from being president. I was too, but I was also worried about keeping Donald Trump from it, but he got it, so I didn't want either one.
They were able to do a lot at one time. They were able to drug up Povetkin and try to keep Hillary from being president all at once. The Russians.
Yeah, it's hard to tell them what else they were doing. But, Jeremiah, you got any news you want to talk about?
Yeah.
Because this just sets up that, the greatest show we'll ever have is before Joshua fights Wilder.
Yeah, really.
I'm going to call Abel Sanchez and see if he'll train me for the argument.
Yeah, I can't wait for that one. So one thing I want to touch on first before I go into my last bit of news is just I wanted to talk a little bit about Horn. So I don't know if this fight, with Manny Pacquiao and Jeff Horn, I'm honestly not convinced it's any better than Chris Algieri versus Manny Pacquiao or Brandon Rios. Again, I don't understand. Maybe Horn's management team should get a little flack here because they're throwing a guy way in over his head when Top Rank, so Bob Arum actually owns Jeff Horn's promotional side coming to the U.S., so he got a little involved monetarily with Jeff Horn. I don't understand why they didn't put Jeff Horn in with a guy like Jesse Vargas. That's just my 2 cents. I kind of feel bad for the guy. Anyway, so anybody who's on Twitter and follows boxing, I'm not a big tweeting guy myself. I've got a little more into it lately, just kind of help my relevancy a bit. But it seems as if Guillermo Rigondeaux and Vasil Lomachenko and Aegis Klimas, the manager for many of the good Eastern Europeans, they've been bantering back and forth about putting a fight together. All I want to say is I want that fight done. I don't give a shit about the politics.
Watch your language, Jeremiah. You've been told about this repeatedly. I'm going to take half your paycheck for this show. Go ahead.
I'm not. Well, what's that paycheck going to be?
John Einreinhofer's over there thinking Jeremiah.
There was a Billy Preston song about that. Nothing from nothing.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think that's the best fight that could be made under 135 pounds. I want to see it done.
We know you do because you're in love with Vasil Lomachenko. All right, John Einreinhofer, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm looking at this. I'm intrigued by this Jarrell Miller-Gerald Washington fight that got signed for the undercard of Mikey Garcia and Adrian Broner. I like Miller a lot. He doesn't have the amateur background. He was a kickboxer, did some MMA, but he's got that kind of big thudding power and got that stamina that a lot of kickboxers have. And Gerald Washington, I don't think's all that great, but one thing Gerald Washington's kind of shown me he can do as his career's gone on is, you know, he's 6'6", and he can stick that jab out there. He does have a decent jab. You saw that against Eddie Chambers. He saw it to a degree against Wilder. And, you know, Jarrell Miller will have to, even though he's a big guy, he's going to have to figure out a way to at least get beyond that jab and get some of his power on Washington. I think he'll be able to do that, but I think it's going to be a good indication, not that Washington is that spectacular, but I think it'll be a good indication for down the road as to what Jarrell Miller will be able to do when he fights some of the bigger heavyweights in the division. In other words, you know, how would he project against a Joshua-type guy? Not that by any means Washington is Joshua, but just, you know, a real big guy that can put a jab out there on him, how he's able to deal with that. So that could be an entertaining fight, too, while it lasts. So I'm kind of looking forward to that.
All right, John Raspanti, any final words?
Yeah, I'm going off the script here a little bit. I wrote an article.
We never have a script, by the way, but go ahead.
I thought I had. Oh, okay. I thought I had one here. All right, good. I'm glad. I thought I had something in my hand here. Frank Buglioni, who I wrote about in Max Boxing. I've been writing about him for years, and I always admire boxers, any kind of athlete. They don't have the real talent like some, but they are so full of moxie and guts that I always end up forgetting the fact that I'm supposed to be an impartial writer and pulling for them just because of that. And the fact that Frank is one of the nicest people ever. We had him on the Ringside Boxing Show about 2 months ago, all the way from London. He agreed to call us at like midnight to be on our show. And I've known him and I admire him. And he's fighting this Saturday at the O2 against Ricky Summers. He's defending his British light heavyweight title, obviously flying under the radar because Frank is never going to be an elite fighter, but to me, he's elite because he's so gutsy, like so many fighters, but he even takes it up the next level. If you guys saw that fight against Burton that he had when he won the British title, light heavyweight title in December, I wrote about it. I thought it was a phenomenal, one of the best fights I've ever seen. He was on the ropes. He was staggered. He was cutting. His eye was bleeding, but he came back like he always does and won. So I'll be watching Frank this Saturday. Probably writing about him for Max Boxing. He's taking on an undefeated guy, so you just don't know. But as always, he will put it all out there, and we'll see what happens. Frank still hasn't learned how to duck a right hand, but in a way that still makes him kind of more exciting because he'll take about 4 or 5 just to land one.
All right, and speaking of guys like that, I want to remind everybody to go out and get Intimate Warfare. You can get it on Amazon.com, written by John Raspanti, Dennis Taylor. Great book. Great pictures, too. You want to tell us a little bit about the photographer there? Because I know me and Jeremiah, we're not lawyers like John, so we are really smitten by pictures in a book.
Well, that's it.
I like pictures as evidence, you know.
That's right. Ed Mulholland, guys, he's one of the best in the business. He's taking pictures for everybody, HBO, The Ring, everyone, and he's also one of the nicest guys. And we got him because he was there. He was at Ringside. He wasn't watching it on HBO. I'm talking about Gatti-Ward like the rest of us, most of us bozos. He was there at Ringside taking the pictures. So those are live shots from those fights. So it was just thrilling. And Ed is a phenomenal guy, phenomenal photographer. So as I told you when we spoke a few weeks ago, we were just very lucky to get him, and he's so easy to work with. So I'm just so thrilled that his picture is on the cover of Intimate Warfare.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, it's a great book. Highly recommend it. Make sure you go to Amazon and buy it. You can also check out the interview I did with John Raspanti a couple weeks ago on thegruelingtruth.net. Want to remind everybody also to listen to the Ringside Boxing Show with Dennis Taylor, John Raspanti, every Sunday night on thegruelingtruth.net. Usually be up around 9 o'clock Eastern Time, so you can go there and check that out. I want to remind everybody to check out our sponsors, Replenishing Care Technologies Inc.com, Power Plus Mouth Guards, Gridiron Mo. Make sure you check all of them out. You can either go to their websites or you can find their websites by going to thegruelingtruth.net, clicking that. You can check out all the Grueling Truth shows on iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes. Anywhere you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for John Raspanti, John Einreinhofer, Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.